You're with Julian on the Brown Note and a review of the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. I won't go through the long and convoluted story about Guy Ritchie and my thoughts on him as I have done so on other reviews, but as far as turnarounds go for a director I trashed for the first half of his career, it's been a remarkable last sort of almost decade, not quite, but definitely like one of the most astonishing, almost like if M. Night Shyamalan started making good films. It's just like, what happened? And he pairs with Henry Cavill here from The Man from U.N.C.L.E., which was like, that was a shining star in his filmography at that point. I was like, where did that come from? And it got trashed by critics. But really, The Gentleman in 2019 was such a good film and completely at odds. It was almost like that he'd become a good filmmaker and gone back to his early roots of Snatch and Lock, Stock, which weren't great films. They were just very enjoyable films, but they're pretty bad films. And had, remade them as a much classier filmmaker. Wrath of Man was, I thought, a waste of that period, Guy Ritchie and Jason Statham. But again, it was pretty decent. It wasn't like the rock and roll era of terrible films. Operation Fortune, Ruse de Guerre, another missed opportunity, but half very, very good film. Particularly Hugh Grant and I can't remember a name off the top of my head, but half of it was spectacularly funny. And The Covenant, I thought they really screwed the release of that film up by calling it Guy Ritchie's The Covenant, because it was a very serious war film that had nothing tonally in common with a Guy Ritchie film. So they put Guy Ritchie's name ahead of it because of another film called The Covenant. The dumbest move in modern movie history, which probably hamstrung the whole film. Well worth watching. You would never know it was done by Guy Ritchie. Jake Gyllenhaal is superb in it. Really interesting film about Middle Eastern warfare. And his latest, the Ministry of... He's really prolific lately. The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare is kind of like melding the serious world war film of The Covenant with the Man from U.N.C.L.E. era. Well, not era, perhaps. He's known for his sort of comedic, very, very painfully post Quentin Tarantino style. But when it was done as well as it was with The Man from U.N.C.L.E., with a great deal of class in the cast, this is like in between the two. It's actually a true story, the original version of this film called Operation Postmaster, which is that Winston Churchill had this secret operation to illegally send a team of commandos down to, I think, like the middle of West Africa to basically steal these boats that the Germans were using to restock their U-boats that were basically ruling the Atlantic and stopping the millions of tons of goods that needed to come to the UK at that point in the Second World War, because obviously the main trade in England was from Europe, which was completely Nazi Germany by that point. And that would have ended the war, because England needed several million tons of food a week and arms to come in from America. And the U-boats were just decimating the fleets and also stopping the Americans wanting to have a heavier involvement in World War II. So they basically stopped the main supply chain for the U-boats doing this. And another very interesting aspect is the leader of the expedition, Gus March Phillips, who tragically died not that long after this expedition, is regarded as the template for James Bond. And Ian Fleming was part of the British intelligence apparatus at the time, and he's the guy that is most likely to have been the inspiration for James Bond. Very daring do guy, which is doubly interesting that Henry Cavill plays him here, given that Henry Cavill is obviously one of the preemptive choices for the new James Bond. So this is a heavily stylized version of that story involving real people. Several real characters are involved. And basically we get Henry Cavill as the typical... It's a Dirty Dozen style film where Henry Cavill's continually imprisoned for bad behaviour in the military. and rescued to lead this suicide mission and go on this sailing boat down the coast of Africa, avoiding the Germans along the way, but also going into neutral Spanish territory to commit these acts, which at the time would have probably pulled Spain into the war on the side of Nazi Germany. And Churchill could have likely been ousted as leader of the Tories in England, who were in charge of the country at the time during wartime, for committing such an unspeakable act. And it all ended in, well, you can find out. He puts together his team. It's very Dirty Dozen, so he puts together his ragbag team of people. And there's two people that actually go to Africa to set the groundwork. So there's this big Nazi military naval base in this port in this West African country that's controlled by Spain. And they're not behaving particularly nicely. I can't remember who the lead guy is, but he's very good. Is it T. Schweiger as Heinrich Löhr? I think that's the main Nazi guy in it. Or is it? Yeah, I think it is. He's very sadistic. He's shown to be someone that enjoys sadistic torture of captives, and as nasty a Nazi as you could possibly hope for. And very good, I thought, in the film. And then there's Eliza Gonzalez and I can't remember who the other guy is. But two of them go down there to massage his ego and throw a party and get him to come along with all the Nazis to distract them while they're initially trying to blow these boats up to stop the U-boats being rescued. I thought this was tremendous. Actually, there's so many flaws in it, I can't call it tremendous. There are a lot of flaws in this film. But as far as enjoyment goes, it's a hugely enjoyable film. It's certainly very superficial and incredulous, and there's lots wrong with the narrative. There's lots that's very derivative about the narrative, but I didn't really care watching it. It's so fun. It's like Henry Cavill again is like, there's not much to his character, not much is asked of him, but what is there is extremely entertaining. It's a very entertaining film. There's nothing that is particularly oppressive about a war film here. It's just almost A-team level fun with some pretty graphic violence along the way. The cinematography is fantastic by Ed Wilde. Really, it looks like a very high budget film. I don't think it was $60 million. That's quite a high budget, actually. And another box office bomb this year. But that's got nothing to do with the quality of film this year. It seems that people just aren't going to the cinema. And who would want this particular kind of war film at this stage, I don't know. But it is an incredibly good fun film. Particularly because the cast is so fun as well. Like Isa Gonzalez, and perhaps this is an example where the narrative and the writing fall down a bit. I've really liked her since I've seen her in some other films. She's a Mexican actress. She was in, I think, Bloodshot, the one with Van Diesel. I noticed her in that, and I thought she was very good. And she was in Ambulance, which is very good. I thought she was also in the Godzilla vs. Kong. So I've liked her in her last few films. She plays the English Rose, but not an English Rose. So she's like an undercover operative working for the British government that basically puts herself in as this femme fatale to try and distract this main Nazi and lure him. They don't really play up the potentiality of the fear and dread of her position enough. It could have been a very strong dramatic element to the story. And quite a lot of them end up as just like loose threads that end up being tied off far too neatly. If you want to nitpick, which you can do, because that's continual throughout the film. Nothing is written deeply or above surface level. But she is great in the role. What's After Her is great as well. We even get a song and dance from her. And Alan Richardson, who's the guy that plays Jack Reacher on the Reacher TV series, an absolute giant of a man, plays Anders Lassen, a real character again, who ended up the only non-Commonwealth country combatant to be given the Victoria Cross in World War II. And not even for this battle either, for a subsequent one. I should point out that the Isa Gonzalez and Henry Cavill characters, Gus March Phillips and Marjorie Stewart, married just months after this operation, which is kind of amazing as well. And Henry Golding as well. And the casting is really, really good here. Everyone's a great deal of fun, even if you've seen this kind of thing 100 times before. He's an Asian-looking British actor who was the lead in Crazy Rich Asians, where he played a billionaire Asian playboy who marries beneath him and so on. They don't play up that here at all. He's just portrayed as an English officer, which he does without me even realising it was him, actually. So there's a lot of interest down the cast. There's lots of colourful action. The action is very well helmed. The budget here does allow for some very interesting sort of wide panoramic, large-scale battles going on. There's not one original bone in its body. There are times when it really does feel like, you know, tepid bathwater Tarantino, but I was completely enthralled throughout. I didn't find it ever getting boring. So I'm going to give The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, which is another terrible title from Guy Ritchie, and another strong film to his bow. I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. Just terrific entertainment.